blocking the left lane.
Okay.
Travel time from DuSable Lakeshore Drive to the Veterans Memorial Tollway is now 40 minutes. Inbound 27 from 70 Lamont Road to 83 and Pulaski to Kedzie. On Ryan, traffic is slow 95th to 87th from Cermak to Roosevelt. It's 15 minutes, 95th to downtown. Bishop Ford is congested, 111th to Merge. West Indiana, eastbound 94 at State Road 49. There's high water, but the roadway is passable. That's traffic. I'm Jim Calamonte.
Tom Hartman. Donald Trump made being a psychopath fashionable. He made it acceptable.
Okay.
And his neurological tribe of psychopaths are like.
Hi, everybody. How you doing today? Hey, Linda. Hey, everybody. Like and share, like and share, like and share. We'll get some good news from Pastor Vicki Johnson. And I'm just going to grab this story.
Weekdays 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. on WCPT 820.
I struggled with symptoms like frequent gas and stomach pain for years.
I was bloated all the time with daily diarrhea.
At first, I thought it was what I was eating.
I kept thinking it was stomach issues.
So I did my research and talked to my doctor, and we finally uncovered the truth.
It was actually EPI. Exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, or EPI, is a condition where your pancreas is unable to help break down your food.
It can lead to symptoms like diarrhea, gas, bloating, stomach pain, unexplained weight loss, and oily stools.
And EPI symptoms can be.
Hi, everybody. How you doing? How you doing? We're going to be talking about these vaccine mandates that we're about to see rolled out in Chicago and really all over the country. I want to know from you if you think it's going to work. Do you think it's going to work? How do you feel about them?
So don't wait any longer. Use the symptom checker
So
at
we're going to do that.
identifyepi.com and schedule a
15 seconds.
Thank you,
Ask,
Paul.
could I have EPI?
Sponsored by AbbVie.
Because facts matter. You are listening to WCPT 820.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. It's afternoon. Santita Jackson Show, WCPT 820. The nation's largest progressive talk radio station. I am Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Let's talk today about vaccine mandates with the Pfizer vaccine getting full FDA approval. Now we're seeing mandates rolled out all over the place. Not from the federal government, but in private industry. It's increasingly going to be difficult for you to shop, for you to even have your job if you do not get the vaccine or if you do not get these shots. How do you feel about that? I mean, particularly as we're looking at the reduced efficacy of these vaccines. Do we really feel comfortable? A lot of people do not. And how is that going to work out when many people might feel that they're being forced? Indeed, the Chicago Police Department, the Chicago Police Union, they said that they are going to fight Mayor Lightfoot with all of their might against being forced to get these vaccines. But I want to know what you think. City workers are going to be mandated to get vaccines in Chicago, but New York, we're seeing that happen increasingly and all over the country. How do you feel about that? And then, of course, we're going to be looking at how to protect ourselves against COVID-19, against these variants with Dr. Shanina Knighton and Dr. Deborah Verholden. Indeed, Dr. Deborah Verholden is going to talk to us about policy, what we need to be looking at, what we need to be pressing for. Her point has always been equity, not just in terms of your access to the vaccines, to the shots, but your access to therapeutics. Increasingly, I saw someone on my timeline yesterday who said that they asked for therapeutics and they couldn't get them. Now, we got to talk about that too, because that's not right. Some doctors are going to CVS and they're not able to get, their patients are not able to get ivermectin and other medicines, therapeutics. They're not able to get those prescriptions filled. We need to talk about that. We need to talk about how you are healed once you get COVID-19. And you know, in my own life, COVID has come home. And so I was concerned about this. You know, I've been talking about therapeutics way before both of my parents were hospitalized with COVID-19. And this is a real issue, I think, for all of us. And before COVID comes home to you, be concerned about it. Okay. So let's talk, everybody, because we need to talk about a whole lot. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about Afghanistan because that is becoming a real issue because they told us no. They said, yeah, you better get out of here by the 31st or you will face consequences. What will that mean? Boy, oh boy, let's get to some of these headlines. Chicago, we're going to have a high of 88 degrees, partly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, a high of 84 degrees, mostly sunny. The Dow closed up yesterday 30 points. The NASDAQ closed up 77 points. The S&P 500 closed up 6 points, and they are breaking records. They are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Wall Street's doing great. Main Street still struggling. The Twins, 9, but the Red Sox, 11. Wow. The Cubs will be facing off against the Rockies today. And the White Sox, well, they were triumphant over the Blue Jays, 5-2. President Biden has decided not to extend the deadline for American troops who are withdrawing from Afghanistan, despite pressures from G7 and U.S. leaders alike. Biden has said his decision to stick to the August 31st deadline is in large part driven by persistent security risks. Indeed, the Pentagon says it can evacuate all remaining Americans by next week. And the first U.S. troops to leave Afghanistan since the current crisis arose are on their way out. And that is in the wake of the Taliban saying the answer is no. If the U.S. or the U.K. were to seek additional time to continue evacuations, the answer is no, according to their spokesman, Nail Shaheen. He said, or there would be consequences. This will create mistrust between us. If we occupy your country, what will you say to me? Maybe I killed your people in your country. What will you say? I think our people suffered a lot, bloodshed, destruction, everything. But we say the past is the past. The past of a part of our past history. So now we want to focus on our future. So they're telling us to get out. And we are doing it with all deliberate speed, as the G7 nations are saying. Try to extend it. Not going to work, everybody. The coronavirus, the COVID-19 cases appear to be leveling off after a 2-month increase, everybody. The World Health Organization says that more than 4.5 million new cases and 68,000 new deaths worldwide happened last week, which was only a slight increase over the previous week. Though they are saying don't get too optimistic because there was a similar pattern in May before the Delta variant spurred a worldwide surge in outbreaks. Moderate and progressive Democrats are at odds at how these two big bills that make up the Democratic wide-ranging economic agenda should proceed. Progressives in the House want the final budget reconciliation package to move at the same time as the citizens' bipartisan infrastructure package. It's almost $5 trillion, everybody. What do you think about that? Do you think that we need to get this money to the American people? Ooh, I think so. Representative Seth Moulton from Massachusetts, a Democrat, and Peter Mayer, a Republican from Michigan, flew unannounced in Kabul in the middle of this evacuation, stunning the State Department and U.S. military personnel who had to divert resources to provide security and information to them. So what do you think about that, everybody? They said that they want to find out what's going on the ground themselves. Speaker Pelosi said in a Dear Colleague email last night, I write to reiterate that the Departments of Defense and State have requested that the members not travel to Afghanistan during this time of danger. But they did. Do you think that was the right thing? Call me or text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. 1 trillion reasons. That is the headline in Bloomberg. As the U.S. and its allies rush to evacuate Afghanistan, China is setting its sights on the country's vast mineral wealth, everybody. Since the fall of Kabul this month, Chinese analysts and state-run media have touted the potential to develop untapped reserves worth more than $1 trillion, everybody. And remember, they share a small border, but they share a border nonetheless with Afghanistan. China does. Smartphones and electric vehicles have created new demand for Afghanistan's rare earths and lithium. China, which has invested $60 billion in neighboring Pakistan, is well positioned to dig them up and transport them to factories. Let me get some good news. There are so many other headlines I can share with you, but I will be posting them throughout the day. But I wanted to hear from Pastor Vicki Johnson. Pastor Vicki Johnson from the St. Thomas Lutheran Church here in Chicago. Of course, she is safely holding in-person services outside from 11:45 to 12:15 at 80th and Jeffrey. You don't want to miss it. How you doing, Pastor Johnson?
I am doing well, Santita. And what about you?
I am doing well. God is good.
Thank God.
God is good.
Yeah. So, good morning, to all of your stars and your friends. There is some good news today. There is a prolific musician, composer, producer, conductor that has been a supporter of the movement and a friend of the Jackson family since the beginning. He is Maestro Quincy Jones.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. He has so much music that is enjoyed by millions. And one of my favorite Q songs is not as popular as others, but it touches my soul. It is Love and Peace. I listen to it often, but it doesn't sound like what love or peace should sound like. What do you mean? It is not bright and happy with all major chords. It's not up-tempoed. Listen, he uses a lead guitar and a tenor sax for solos instead of violins and a harp. I wondered why he would name this piece Love and Peace. Then I thought about it. Love has its ups and downs. Love is present in joy and sorrow. Love sees us through difficult times and tumultuous days. Peace is likewise. We have been fighting for peace all of our lives. Jesus even had to speak for peace when the waves were boisterous. You have to do something to experience peace. I can imagine that this could possibly be the thinking of Quincy Jones when he composed this work. So as you meditate on love and peace today, know that they don't always come easy, but they will come. They will be with you. Love and peace will guide you. Open your heart today to love and peace, knowing that they may not be what you think they should be, but they will be with you. If you can do this on today, and I believe that you can, then to me, that's good news.
Amen to that. I have to tell you, you know what's so ironic? I actually listened to that song yesterday.
Did you?
I was downloading the album. And I said, I haven't heard this in a long time. And you're right. When we hear these love songs, they're generally, well, they call them major ups and minor downs,
That's right.
in music, and Pastor Johnson is a great musician herself. And so when you're studying music, one of the ways that you are able to distinguish between a major and a minor is that, the love songs are bright and they're sunny. And, anything that makes you sad sounds dark. That's typically in a minor key. But you're right, Quincy Jones really captured the full range of the love experience that we have on earth, which is joy and pain.
Yeah.
Thank you, Frankie Beverly. Sunshine and rain. I mean, it's all of it. And I thank you for that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Because oftentimes, we all we want is the sunshine, everybody. And if we only had sunshine, we'd be baked to death. How about that?
Wow.
Well, you need it all, right? Yeah.
Oh, yes.
You need it all. You need it all.
Full gambit.
80th and Jeffrey, everybody. You want to go to the St. Thomas Lutheran Church in Chicago, from 11:45 to 12:15 on Sunday. They are physically distanced, not socially distanced. And you're going to get some great news from Pastor Vicki Johnson. So proud of her. And stay right here. We've got Dr. Deborah Holden from Michigan State University. She is their Associate Dean of Public Health coming out of Johns Hopkins University. And we're seeing a lot. We're going to be talking about these vaccines today, the shots, and how we can process the mandates, even as we're beginning to get different information uh, about these vaccines, about their diminished efficacy. We're beginning to see, Dr. Deborah Holden. Indeed, we see that there is we're finding that they're not as effective. The effectiveness of frontline workers, this is from a Bloomberg report, declined to 66% after the Delta variant became dominant, compared with 91% before it arose, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Dr. Deborah Holden, to me, that goes to the heart of what you've been trying to tell us, that this is like the Swiss cheese model, that we need many different layers of protection. It's never going to be just the shot. It's always going to be, it's going to be a lot of different things that we need to do. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, sure. This is a great point. And I always like to do a little bit of educating. So I take you back to the distinction between efficacy versus effectiveness. Efficacy is how well something works under ideal conditions. Those are the conditions under which things are tested in clinical trials. All of that, everything about a clinical trial is controlled. It's a controlled experiment. The subject, there's exclusion criteria, there's inclusion criteria, there's a lot of resources and support. We figured out for Pfizer, the dosage is 21 days. For Moderna, it's 28 days apart. All of that stuff is regulated. A lot of resources go into place to make sure that we're getting shots in arms as per the clinical protocol, et cetera. That gives us a measure of efficacy. How efficacious is this medication or this therapeutic? How well does it work under these controlled and ideal conditions? Then there's effectiveness, which is where the rubber meets the road and how well things work actually out in real life. We know a lot of people didn't get the shots on the right schedule. They didn't get them 21 days apart. Some people went 2 months in between, the two shots. We also now have different strains, and variants. So how well does this, vaccine work against these variant strains? Now we're going to really understand effectiveness, how well it works in the real world. The difference is the landscape has also changed. This isn't a medication that's being used to treat hypertension. And hypertension is hypertension. This is being used to treat a virus, and not to treat, but to prevent and reduce risk of exposure and illness from a virus. And viruses mutate. So, same thing with the flu vaccine. If we had been giving people the same flu vaccine year after year after year, the effectiveness would be close to zero by now. Because the flu mutates and has different strains every single year. COVID is going to be no different. The difference is the vaccine that many of us got, the virus that many of us got vaccinated against, it does still have some effectiveness in preventing and reducing illness and hospitalization and death from some of these other variants. But it's not as strong as it was with the air quote alpha strain or the original strain, which is why what's predictable is this is going to be a seasonal vaccination. And the vaccine is going to have to keep pace and be relevant to the most current strains of the virus. And that is not new to us. We deal with this with flu. This will be very similar to what we have to do for COVID.
It's interesting because we're really trying to figure this out. That's why I want to know about the different layers of protection, because many people, they felt that once they got the shots, that's why I'm reluctant to call them vaccines, because of our thinking about vaccines, Dr. Deborah Holden. And Reverend Johnson, are you still there? Okay, well, it just, because our thinking, when we think of a vaccine, we think that we're inoculated, we're fine. And that's not what happened here. And so I think that's why, it seems like I know you say, Dr. Deborah Verholden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State, that this feels like I'm saying the same thing over and over and over again. I said, no, but I think you need to repeat it so that we can begin to do the right thing and so that we can even cut down on the fights that people are having, because people felt that once they got the shots, Dr. Deb, that they could, why are you asking me to put the mask back on? Why are you asking me to do this? Why do I have to take a COVID test? Why? Just going forward, what would you like to see us do, Dr. Deb?
Well, I think what has to happen is that we need to have, from a public health, government perspective, we've got to improve the communications around all of these things. And I said it to Dr. Fauci. I asked a former CDC director, Robert Redfield, why are you all not doing a daily press briefing? White House, CNN, MSNBC, front and center, and in the major outlets where all of you all are together every day, just saying, here's where we are today, folks. I wouldn't care if you have to, like I say, I feel like a broken record. They should be a broken record too. They have not, I talk about stepping out on the skinny branches, and I feel like I've had to step out on the skinny branches because the CDC has said things, and I have come out 5 seconds later and said, don't do that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry to say this, but please disregard that advice. When the day they came out and said anybody who's vaccinated don't have to wear a mask, I came out the same 5 seconds later. I said, don't do that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's not the case. I don't know why they said that, but don't do that. And so we have to do better, because I think you're right. A lot of the communications have been inconsistent. There's been a lot of blaming. There's been a lot of partial truth, half truth, and what I call lies of omission, where important facts and information that people would have needed to make empowered and well-informed choices have sort of been glazed over or glossed over or just left out. And so it's created this unnecessary mistrust and contention. Calling this a disease of the unvaccinated is not completely fair. And don't get me wrong, if we had more people vaccinated, we would see some shifts in spread. But it's more than just the unvaccinated. It's more than that. And vaccination doesn't equal the panacea to solve the problem and everybody's great now, get back to business as usual. So I think that's something that absolutely has to happen. And I just really wish that these leaders, who are really, Dr. Fauci is like a celebrity now. He's a celebrity. This is the same man who told us originally we didn't have to wear masks. This is the same man who sat on the sidelines of the former president and pretended as if he couldn't do more because the president was such a monster. Well, now you've got a president that hasn't muzzled you, or at least we can't tell. Where is he? Where is he out on the front lines every day saying, hey, folks, this is where we are? I've seen more retractions come from him. He said, we'll be out of this by next fall. And people went up in arms. He said, my bad. Next spring.
And this is the kind of
change the message for your boost your popularity. Like what?
Well, this was information. Look, it was Dr. Birx who told President Trump that we would be out of this by the spring. She told him that. So no. I'm like, wait a minute. He's getting past this information from these people. It was Bob Woodward who knew that this was airborne. He knew it. He sat on it so he could publish his book. Give me a break. I'm just, look, stop, everybody. Stop, because we politicize this. If you don't want the vaccine, you must be a Trumper. Stop it. People have a lot of reasons for doing a lot of things. What we're trying to do is find our way out of it. That's what we need to do. Well, and that means everybody needs to mask up, right? I got 30 seconds before we go to break.
Everybody that has been a no to the vaccine is not an anti-vaxxer. And I don't like that language. Again, I feel like we devolved into the blame game. But what we haven't done is we haven't held the right people, the right systems, and the right distinctions accountable. The distinction governor is important now more than ever because we don't have federal mandates. We should have had a federal mask mandate. And so we had to rely on governors to give us a state mask mandate. And even in many states, they lifted them too early. So that's what I mean by distinction. Hold your county executive, hold your health officers, hold your governors, hold your Congress people, hold your president to account. Hold your public health leaders.
Absolutely.
Dr. Fauci is a distinction. He's the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Hold that man accountable, not Dr. Fauci, the distinction director of that agency.
All right.
We keep dealing with the people and the politics and not the actual distinction and the bigger public health problems and crises that we're in. This isn't about personality or politics.
It's not.
Public health.
Yeah. Right back. Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Okay, you got to help me to get out, Deb, because I can't step over my break. But you know, I'm like, what are we doing here? You know, and it's so politicized. I had several conversations over the past few days. I mean, just really, it's almost like politics. I don't like this conversation because it becomes like people want to have a fight. You know, and I'm like, hold on. We're all trying to get out of this. We're trying to work our way through this so that the only way we're going to get out of this is to go through this. But blaming people, and look, when folks who've gotten vaccinated have the virus, hello. Okay? So please stop.
Well, I think we all want to get out of it, but all of us are not working to get out of it. It's just like in the movement how there would be benefits that would come from us boycotting, picketing, striking. Everybody wanted the benefit, but not everybody wanted to do the groundwork. And so we are accustomed to carrying the load, but we just have to speak up and encourage more to get on board.
Well, no, look, you just said a whole lot, because we sure would see them come over to Operation Breadbasket and Operation Push. Thank you so much. And they were real fancy after they got their contracts. And we were like, whoa, you do know. And would get upset and call Reverend a shakedown artist because he would say, can you help us to stay open? You know that, Vicky. Now, you know, dealt with forever. And it's like, wait. You know, the reason you are open is because we sat up and boycotted Red Rooster. Yeah.
That's right. We did the work. Boycotted A&P.
National. We're the ones who walked into the store. I remember as a 3 and 4. Yeah, I remember as a 3 and 4 year old seeing the flies on the meat in the stores in the Black community. Those are some of my earliest memories. Dad would take we'd all leave the breadbasket meeting and we'd go over to a store, and you would see flies and rotting meat that was being sold to Black people. Pastor Johnson, isn't that what happened?
That is exactly what happened.
Oh, my gosh.
And we did the work. They got the good meat. Everybody got the good meat after that. But we all had to do the work that for not just us, but for those who would not do the work.
So, you know,
we want to get out. We want to get out, but we don't want to.
You don't want to do the work, and you got to do the work. You got to do it. That's all there is to it. You got to do it. So,
back in 40.
So, you know what? You know, Pastor, you can stay with us, but I've got Dr. Knighton on with us. Dr. Knighton? Dr. Knighton?
Good morning. How are you?
Doing great. We've got your favorite, Dr. Deborah Furholden. We're on the India watch, waiting for this baby to get here.
Good morning. I do know today is a significant day, because we go in at 7:30 for a scheduled induction. So that's where we are now.
All right.
Yeah, I just don't like induction. I feel like if you go, more than a week past the delivery date, then you start to deal with placenta degrading and risk and all that.
Can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. I'm Santita Jackson. You're coming you see the nation's largest progressive talk radio station based here in Chicago, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want you to meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson and Friends page and on my YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show channel. Please like and subscribe there. Call us or text us at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. That's WCPT. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text. I want to hear your voices today. I want to hear your questions about COVID-19. At the top of the hour, we're going to be talking about the vaccine mandates that are being rolled out all over the country. If you work for the city of Chicago, there's going to be a vaccine mandate. We're beginning to see that happen in New York and all across the country. What do you think about that? Particularly for those who they've not been hesitant. They don't want it for a whole lot of reasons. Indeed, I'm seeing on the chat line, Dr. Deborah Verholden, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University, and Dr. Shanina Knighton, research scholar at Case Western Reserve University, registered nurse, and an infection preventionist. We don't hear enough from them. I didn't even know about the particular discipline, but I'm so glad that I do now. People are saying you need to do your own research, do the work yourself. Truth for sure. Trutho for sure. None of the vax stop you from getting the virus. They lessen the symptoms once you get the virus. None of them prevent transmission from human to human. Booster shots forever. They don't work either. Trying to get some more of these. You continued on to say, do your due diligence, research for yourself, and stop listening to the so-called experts. I see that over and over and over again, Dr. Deb and Dr. Knighton. Dr. Deb, why don't you speak to what you just heard?
Well, that's a little bit off, right? And I don't diminish somebody's own, understanding. So here's what I will say. The vaccine is going to significantly reduce the chances that somebody will both contract and transmit COVID. It does do that. That's proven. That's not my opinion. That's not the so-called expert making up things. That's what the data substantiates. It does significantly reduce the chances that you will contract it and that you will spread it. It's not 100%. And we're now actually understanding with all of these new strains out what that number looks like. It will also substantially reduce clinically relevant symptoms. And it will greatly reduce the chances that you will have to be hospitalized or will die from COVID. That's what it does. And some people might say, well, that's not enough for me because it won't stop me from getting it, because it won't stop me from transmitting it, or because it won't, allow me to go out unmasked. It's not worth it to me. And I just ask people to consider this a risk-benefit analysis. It's easy to stand there and say that when you've actually never had COVID. When you talk to people who've had COVID and they tell you about the fear and the experience of not being able to breathe, when you talk to people who have long-haul COVID and recovered and maybe didn't even have really severe symptoms when they had COVID, but their recovery is still ongoing. They still don't have their full win back. We've not talked about the people who've needed kidney transplants and all the people who needed dialysis while they were on COVID. We don't talk a lot about the people who have ongoing now heart problems as a function of the havoc that COVID wreaked on them underneath, the skin. COVID is not just, some bad cold and flu symptoms for a few days, for everybody, and then all things back to normal afterwards. So if you actually start to weigh those things out, I can't, it's so interesting to me that people have this bar of perfection on this COVID vaccine that we don't have on any other medication.
But let me tell you what happened.
Anything else.
You're right. The problem is the message you just gave was the message they should have given months ago or a year ago. The head of Merck said this shot will not be a magic bullet. We are not serving the public well when we tell them that. But that's what we were told. If you had told us what this did, you are now watching, Dr. Deb, is mistrust. Because people didn't say what you said.
Well-earned mistrust, and I get that.
Yeah, they didn't say what you just said inside of a minute. It's something people can live with, and people can live with the risk. When you say, it's not going to do all of that, but it will do a lot of this. When you hear that,
Santita?
Dr. Knighton.
So I'm just going to chime in a little bit, okay? And this is where, again, and it's not about being a pro-vaxxer or anti-vaxxer, but this is the truth. I often find that some of the individuals that do critique the vaccine are not critiquing anything else when it comes to, let's say, the fact that our meat is vaccinated. So meat carries so much disease, right? And they on a better vaccination schedule and a better diet than what we are. And no one's ever saying, okay, well, what ingredients, what mRNA technology are they putting inside of my pork steak, you know what I'm saying, or my ribs in order for me to have some safe meat, and realizing that those vaccines that's in that meat is still potentially going to transfer to you in some form of fashion. The same exact thing when we talk about genetically modified pork, which just happened also too. So December of 2020, around the same time we were talking about COVID vaccines, they were removing an ingredient called alga from pigs. So making genetically modified pigs for us to be able to consume pork in a way that won't contribute to the allergy problems that people have been having and the diabetes. So I'm simply bringing this up to say that when people are eating their bacon, when we're eating our steaks, when we're eating our chicken, are we saying, you know what, we're going to give the same criticism and require the same FDA approvals in regards to what it is that we're eating opposed to what it is they're putting in their bodies? And what people are not balancing is okay, yes, I'm talking about what's behind the one shot thing, okay, behind one shot. But am I talking about all of the modifications that are made to my food that are also possibly requiring vaccines, chemicals, and other things that are going in them? And it's not to say a good or a bad or a, weigh the risk and the benefit thing. I just want people to look at the full spectrum and stop focusing in on just this one thing. That is the problem. And that's why I mentioned when we're talking about prevention, let's look at the overall picture. Let's evaluate, what are we eating on a daily basis? Are we sleeping like we should? Are we keeping our stress levels together? If you're smoking a cigarette, but then here it is, you're like, oh, well, hey, I'm not worried about getting COVID. Are you seriously evaluating that might not be a good idea for you to take the vaccine? So I just wanted to kind of think about things from that standpoint, as well as, like you mentioned, if people are taking medications, your doctor put that medication in front of you and said, hey, this is a good medication to lower your blood sugar, lower your blood pressure, help your kidneys out. But are you even wondering if it's still in the phase trial? You don't ask because the whole intent is for you to get better or to prevent getting worse.
Well,
so I just want us to think about, what does prevention mean to us?
And really consistent about having the best food that we can have. Really taking care of the soil so that the soil can nurture the plants that become the vegetables that we eat. Because, those are all issues. I mean, and in fact, Vicki Wells said Dr. Verholden has been consistent regarding what the vaccine does and doesn't do. I waited to see if she had any side effects before I got because I trust her. I'm clear on what to do. These other ifs, ands, or buts are confusing. See, that's why the messaging is very, very important. But we talk about that all the time. But I think we need to be clear on that. But let's get to something that Dr. Deborah Verholden has been very, very keen on, because you have been talking about really being as hygienic as we can be, which is why, Dr. Knighton is here. The thing is, what should we be doing from day to day? Because we're hearing about the Delta variant. Our children are going back to school. Increasingly, we're being required to come back into work, remote work. That's, some people are going to be doing it. Some people are not. Take me on the elevator down, or going outside of my door and getting on the bus. What should I be doing, Dr. Knighton?
Okay. So, one thing before I get started, and I got two questions. First one is actually a statement. I just want to let people know it is possible to get flu and COVID at the same time. So I just want to make that statement, and I know we can talk about that later on this week or something else, but that's just something to keep in mind, as well as think about prevention of having both of those at the same time.
Well, hold on. Why did you bring that up? You brought it up for a reason.
Because yes, I did. Because as we're talking about prevention, and I know that there's so much emphasis around things to prevent COVID, it's just a reminder that we are going back into flu season, and we know we're anticipating a peak earlier than last year, where typically it would be between December and February, which would be a reason of why people would be vaccinated between September and October. I'm letting people know that they can get flu and COVID at the same time, and having both at the same time can lead to a different level of severity and possibly death. So I'm just bringing that up ahead of time because we are talking about prevention, and we're going into workplaces, we're going into school places. More things than just COVID exist. Okay?
Okay.
Now, if we're talking about the school environment, I can give you my thoughts as well as recommendations in regards to school, or I can do it for work.
Well, what I want you to do is
are going to slightly differ.
First of all, get me on the bus. I'm trying to get to work. A lot of us take the bus.
On public transportation.
Mm-hmm. Or the train.
The question comes. Okay.
Walking out of my door, holding on to the railing as I'm walking down the stairs. I mean, there's just so many. What Dr. Deb, when I talk about the fact that you help us to see that there's so many ways that we can get infected that we do not think about.
Exactly. And so, I'm asking you another question. Are we talking about an apartment or a house?
Well, you give me an apartment, give me a house.
Okay. So if I'm leaving outside of the door of community living and I realize that I've just closed my own door to my apartment, I then have to get on the elevator button where other individuals have touched that button. So while I am getting on the elevator, I'm going to be conscious of the fact that someone touched the button before me to get on, as well as they had to select the button to go down. As I'm making my way down, I then realize that I'm going to have to go outside. So I'm going to have to touch that door either by elbow or by hand. And then when I get onto public transportation, I'm going to have to reach into my wallet and grab the material. Grab it to either insert it. We just don't know in terms of how that mechanism changes. But before I do so, I will be cleaning my hand before going inside of my wallet or inside of my bag. I then realize that I'm going to take a seat, and as I take the seat, I may be someone that needs assistance by way of rail. So when I touch that rail, I'm going to consciously remember to not instantly go in my bag and grab my phone. I'm going to clean my hands before I grab that item. So then afterwards, when I'm getting ready to get off the bus, I may have to use that same rail to get off the bus, and then I'm getting ready to go inside of my workplace. Up until the point of where I'm stationary in my workplace, whether that is in an office, whether that's in a cubicle or somewhere, realizing that I'm touching more than one surface, it has been when I'm stationary that I realize I should clean my hands before I start unpacking my items.
That's a whole lot. That's a whole lot. When I get to my desk at work, presuming I'm at a desk. Or,
Exactly,
let's go to frontline workers. How can they protect themselves? The people who clean in the hospital, the people who clean the office space.
So inside of the hospitals, the one thing that we have working for us is the fact that we do have adequate air exchange systems, which means that the air is constantly moving in a way of where it is taking potentially contaminated air outside of the building and is bringing in fresh air from outside. So that's one advantage that is provided. Again, it's going to be the same step-by-step process that if you are cleaning your hands before putting on gloves and then cleaning your hands after taking off gloves, being conscious of the surfaces that you touch. We also have to realize that in healthcare settings, there are more than just the coronavirus potential. There are other viruses, as well as there are deadly fungus that exist, as well as there are deadly bacteria that exist, some of these which are antibiotic resistant. They can dwell on the bottom of your shoes. They can dwell on the bottom of your bag. So I would tell anyone inside of a healthcare setting to be careful to not sit your bags or your belongings on the floor, because 9 times out of 10, the floor is the largest carrier of germs, because it can carry the germs directly from patients' rooms to outside of the rooms, and we're sharing these same surfaces between healthcare workers, between visitors, and between patients. If we're talking about inside of a work setting, which does differ, if you are commonly sharing a refrigerator, if you are commonly sharing sinks, if you are commonly sharing the bathroom, a lot of these bathrooms may not have an outdoor ventilation system, so I would check to see if the door opens or if it closes. This is something that I do, and I'm just offering it as a recommendation. Everyone is not, people have hypoallergenic situations of where they cannot encounter, let's say, a Lysol spray, meaning that it may very well agitate their allergies. But a 50-50 peroxide mix does not have a scent. Alcohol doesn't have as pungent of a smell. A mist into a closed-in bathroom for which it is a single use is appropriate, just to ensure that the person that was in there before you, if they coughed or they sneezed, and you're at least able to decrease the amount of droplets that may be potentially in the air that could fall on your mask or necessarily fall on your face if you are unmasked. So that is a recommendation in regards to the restroom. When it comes to, like, let's say the surfaces, if you're eating in a break room because of a commonly used table, if you have the option to eat by yourself, I understand that, a lot of people want that social time. If you're doing it with a coworker, I recommend you go outside to be able to socialize if you can. If you are going to be in the break rooms, then I still recommend cleaning off the surfaces, because someone ate there before you and could have potentially also had droplets on that table, and your items as well as your hands may come in contact with that table. Same thing when it comes to the refrigerator handle. Pay attention that when you're going into that community-used refrigerator, your hand touches that. It then is going to grab your food container, right? After you grab your food container, you have to remember, touch that handle. You've now touched your container. You are now possibly going to put it inside of the microwave. So you should be cleaning your hands and only touching the content inside of the container. Otherwise, you just touched your food and touched everything else that everyone else has touched as well.
Dr. Deborah Verholden, you are the person who brought Dr. Shanita Knighton to our attention. This is very important information. Do you think that what she shares with us could help to mitigate spread?
What she shares with us would help mitigate spread of all infections.
Okay.
I mean, most infections are spread person to person. And even if it's an indirect, because it's like droplets in the air or something like that, it still requires people. So in a public health context, we always tell people don't be a vector, like you personally. But then there's all these other vectors out in the world: the handrail, the machine where you put in your information and you put your debit card in. When you make a point of sale transaction, and all these other things. These are the types of things. People like Dr. Knighton have been trying to do this in care settings and in community settings their whole careers. But none of this was put at the forefront. So I think we've got a couple of things missing. We've got the real science behind infection prevention, and then we really also haven't done enough of just focusing on, people's overall health and wellness more generally, so that people, have a fighting chance should they become exposed, the best chance of recovering. I really have maintained, and I still do, this is really a chance for people to take the wheel, take the reins of their own health. Mm-hmm. But there's just so much that we are just unwilling to talk about. And I don't think our nation's leaders have done a very good job of it. And I do believe we have oversold the vaccine and not given enough attention to the other many important layers of protection, which also includes governmental support. I don't want to get away from the fact that if more people had the ability to keep their businesses solvent, to actually shelter in place, to have a living wage where they could still remain, financially viable during this pandemic, we would have also saw a lot less spread. But the reality is people had to keep the lights on. People had to keep food on the table. So it's not just about any one thing. It's about putting all of those things together. And the knowledge is power. So I always learn. I always, I'm now more mindful. And as I get ready to this evening go to the hospital, I'm starting to think, okay.
I'm about to ask you, what are you going to do?
Crawling with germs.
Yes.
They are crawling with germs. I'm going to be very mindful as we go in. And just so Dr. Knight knows, I did buy it. I know I can make it myself, but I wanted it to be simple. I bought some sanitizing hand wipes, and I bought some nasal spray and some throat rinse because I just want to be more vigilant for both myself and my daughter while we're in the hospital. The other thing is my daughter is nursing. I'm like, I need you to be real mindful because I don't want you touching things and then touching your breast. Because, when women go to nurse,
yes,
kind of massage the breast a little bit because you have something on your hand, put it right on your breast, baby goes right to breast, and you didn't crack, you might as well put it right in the baby's mouth. I'm starting to
Dr. Dad.
Right now. I know I'm a good student.
No, it's great, Dr. Debbie. You want to know one other thing that I'm absolutely adamant about, and I'm telling you they will not change protocols, but I am going to keep fighting. And that is the fact that no person should be allowing any individual, not a nurse, not a doctor, not a friend, to touch a baby's hand. That is the first thing a baby is going to put in their mouth. Nobody should ever be grabbing a child by their hand.
My daughter has taken it a step further, and she said, nobody is allowed. I told you we had the conversation about the kissing. She said, none of y'all can kiss her. You can blow kisses, you can say sweet things, but you can't put your mouth to her face. And she said, nobody's allowed to touch her hands or her feet because babies also put their feet in their mouth. We can't get our foot in our mouth, but babies can. And so my daughter has done her work. She loves you too. She's like, y'all are something else. But it's interesting because she has anxiety, right? But what I realize is when her anxiety kicks in is when she doesn't have knowledge, when she doesn't have access, when she doesn't feel empowered. This doesn't make her anxious at all. This makes her feel very calm and very powerful because she now knows something that she can act on. And instead of having the fear of, will I be able to keep my baby safe? She's got a plan. She's got boundaries. She's got some basic things. Yeah.
I've been told that these tools, it's like, oh my gosh, it was kind of wait at home so you don't get sick, during the pandemic. But they're like, you really showing us how do we survive when we get back out here? And just because we're talking about baby India, I got to bring this up too because
I've got 1 minute.
Santita, you asked, okay, just really quick. You asked me to cover the difference between cleaning and sanitizing. Yeah. And I'm saying this because I know baby India going to have her toys cleaned, okay? So cleaning removes the dirt, so like the germs, like from surface or objects. So you can use that, like let's say with a soap or a detergent and water to physically remove the germs from the surface, right? So when you sanitize something, it lowers the number of germs to a safe level, okay? And that's by public health standards. Bringing that up because I actually had instances of where people accidentally, inadvertently, poisoned their children because they were using disinfectant products to clean to clean toys, but their kids had to put these things inside of their mouths, and they were thinking about the germs, not necessarily thinking about the baby's interaction with them, because things fall on the floor. Just make sure that if they are going to fall on the floor, that even after you clean them and sanitize them, that you're wiping them down to where they don't have the chemicals in there afterwards. The other thing is a cell phone is not something at this time that a kid should be playing with. If you are going to allow your kid, and we're talking about even a toddler, to play with a phone, make sure you are cleaning your phone before your child touches it, because I can guarantee you every single surface, every single hand, every single handle that you came in contact with, not thinking about hand hygiene, you've now transferred those germs over to your babies. And remember, our kids cannot get vaccinated right now. Well, it's not recommended because we're still waiting on studies.
Well, and even when they get vaccinated, there's still things that you have to do to keep your children and yourselves safe. That is why we continue to go over this. This is something that Dr. Deborah Verholden emphasized with me. She said, Santita, there are things that we can do to mitigate the spread of this virus. We actually started flattening the curve before we got the vaccine last year. We can do it. We can. So, that's why Dr. Deb is really guiding us here. Director, she is the Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University, but more importantly, Dr. Shanita Knighton, research scholar at Case Western Reserve University. Dr. Knighton, she's about to become a grandma tonight. How about that?
Yes.
Everybody put up their hands and send some healing light and love to Dr. Verholden and her family, and to this baby India as we welcome this baby into the world. Yes, welcome, sweetheart. Back in just a few minutes, we're going to be talking about these vaccine mandates. What do you think about them? Come on, I'm waiting for you. More of the Santita Jackson Show. We're waiting. We're waiting.
I really want, and I don't know I'm going to ask if they're willing to do it because, when babies are born, they take blood, they do some basic tests. I really want to know, does my baby girl have COVID antibodies?
Okay.
I can't help but resist because they told me, and I'm like, I'm believing my colleagues, I'm believing the data, the little bit of data I see. Because, they're still the clinical trials are still ongoing.
Yeah.
Right? They're still doing clinical trials for the under 16 and the under 12, depending on which vaccine we're talking about. They're still doing ongoing clinical trials with pregnant women, and all of these various groups. And so they said the vaccine, if you get the vaccine, baby will get the antibodies from mom. Now, I know because Jordan is going to be nursing that she's going to get the antibodies from the breast milk. But I'm just curious what she's already got on board.
We have Attorney Patillo.
Having gotten vaccinated. Because I really do want to be able to say with some extra degree of certainty to pregnant women, what a gift to give your baby COVID antibodies. So
what would the COVID antibodies do?
Humor me.
No. What will the COVID antibodies do for a baby before you all go? Dr. Deb, can you stay with us for a minute to talk about these mandates?
Sure.
Okay.
Antibodies are it's a running start to the immune response.
Okay.
And so this is why, it's your crew. It's like when COVID comes, you'd be like, oh, let me call my cousins and them. And that's the antibodies is your crew.
well, thank you.
And so if you get COVID, the virus will pass.
We have Mr. McKee.
Give your baby the virus. And obviously these, fetuses, immune systems aren't even fully developed yet. They're really relying on mom's immune system to keep them safe and keep them protected. So when mom gets the vaccine, mom builds antibodies, and then the baby gets the antibodies. They say the antibodies do cross, the COVID antibodies do cross the placenta. The COVID vaccine does not, because it's not in the system long enough. It's not, remember, we're talking about, and I had a great show with Robert. We looked up the ingredients in the COVID vaccine. We looked up the ones in Pfizer because people were so funny. It's really interesting. It's mRNA, some fat, and some sugar. That's what it is. That's what's in the COVID vaccine.
Nice.
It's mRNA. And I told him, I'm like, this mRNA needs a rod. It's so unstable. It's like the weakest piece of the, sort of whole virus.
We have Commissioner Johnson.
It's only a piece.
Great, and that's it.
The instructions, and it's a piece.
Call. No one else should be called.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I'm taking care of that. Yeah. No, keep talking. Commissioner Johnson, hello, Dwight McKee. Hey.
Anna.
Everybody, Commissioner Johnson.
Yes, mic check 1 2.
Okay, are you on speaker?
I'm on my headset and I'm coming downstairs so I don't wake no one up.
Okay.
Can you hear me a little better now?
A little bit better. Dwight, let me hear you.
Nana.
Okay. Robert, hello, let me hear you.
Good morning.
Okay, let me hear you again, Robert.
Good morning.
Okay, are you on speaker?
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay, very good. Okay, Dr. Knighton, are you going to be able to say, or do you have to go? I think she had something to direct today. at 8 o'clock. So stay right there. We've got Dr. Deborah Furholden, Associate Dean of Public Health, with us. We're so excited to talk about these vaccine mandates and how it's a medical issue. For some people, it's a religious issue. For some people, it's a cultural issue. For others, it's a political issue. It's one of these issues that where all issues kind of meet in the middle, and I think we need to look at that. We need to look at that, everybody, because we're about to. I think this is going to be a very, very interesting time. I can hear someone shuffling papers in the background, so just be careful of that. But okay, so we're going to be coming up.
We have Attorney Hoffler.
Oh, Attorney Hoffler's with us. Okay.
Good morning.
Hey, Doc. You know, it's a black thing. Everybody's a doctor. You know what I'm saying. Okay. So we're going to answer all these questions. This will be a great segment. I'm glad to have all of you here today. Okay, I'm hearing papers. Okay. All right. So, I'm
good for about the next 30 minutes.
Okay, very good. So we're going to let her go at the bottom of the hour, Paul, Dr. Deb. Oh my goodness, and she is about to become a grandma tonight.
Hey, Dr. Deb.
Tonight.
Hey, Dwight.
Tonight. Oh, Dave. Tonight. Oh my goodness, that is so exciting. But when you talk about getting induced, my mother's doctor talked about inducing her with my baby sister Jackie. And because it seemed like Mom was pregnant with her for like 11 months. That's what we felt like. I think we were just excited. And my mother was furious, Dr. Deb. She was furious. And then she went into labor the next morning. He knew how to get her. My mother came home mad. Oh my goodness. She said, "Are you kidding me? Induced labor?" Well, I think her anger, and I think she was so furious. That's what happened. The next morning, my sister was born. Just after 12 in the afternoon. Boy. I remember it as if it were yesterday, and it was a long time ago. But those are the things that you remember. Oh, what a joy. What a joy. My Aunt Cynthia came up. You remember her.
30.
Dwight. She came up, and she was here just in time to help babysit for a couple of days. Wow. I miss her too. She's gone on to glory. Stay right there, everybody. Here we're coming up.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I am Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today on this morning drive show. Please call me or text me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278, also known as WCPT. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text. I want to hear from you today. Let's talk about vaccine mandates. City employees in Chicago are going to be required to be vaccinated. What do you think about that? We're seeing that rolled out all across the country, particularly after Pfizer received, after they were fully cleared by the FDA. Now they have been approved. And everyone said that is going to open the door for vaccine mandates. And indeed, that is what is happening. I want to hear from you. What do you think about that? Have you been vaccinated? How do you feel about it? Have you not gotten the shots? How do you feel about that? Are you willing to leave your job? I mean, what? And the police union in Chicago has vowed to fight the mayor tooth and nail. But that is going to be something that we're going to see happen all around the country. Want to know how you feel about that. What do you think about that? Call me at 773-763-9278 and meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Like and share, everybody. And please go to my YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show channel, and like and subscribe over there. And meet me on Twitter at Santita J. I want to hear your voices today. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 88 degrees, partly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 84 degrees. Mostly sunny. The Dow closed up 30 points yesterday. The Nasdaq closed up 77 points. The S&P 500 closed up 6 points. They are all breaking records, everybody. Trading as never before. The Twins, well, they fell to the Red Sox. The Red Sox 11, the Twins 9 yesterday. The Cubs will be facing off against the Rockies today. And the White Sox were triumphant over the Blue Jays, 5-2. President Biden has decided not to extend the deadline for American troop withdrawal from Afghanistan, despite pressure from G7 and U.S. leaders alike. President Biden said his decision to stick to the August 31st deadline is in large part driven by persistent security risks. Indeed, the Taliban on Monday said no to extending, as they put it, the occupation. They said this will provoke a reaction if the U.S. or U.K., the Taliban spokesman said, were to seek additional time to continue evacuations. The answer is no, or there would be consequences. He calls the August 31st deadline a red line. He said, if you stay longer, quote, that will create mistrust between us. If we occupy your country, what will you say to me? Maybe I killed your people in your country. What will you say? I think our people suffered a lot. Bloodshed, destruction, everything. But we say the past is the past, a part of our past history. Now we want to focus on the future. Global COVID-19 cases appear to be leveling off after a 2-month increase. The World Health Organization said that 4.5 million new cases and 68,000 new deaths worldwide last week was only a slight increase over the previous week. Let's talk about these vaccine mandates, everybody. And before I go, hey, Charlie Watts, who's he? He is the quietest Rolling Stone, the drummer, one of the founding members, made his transition at the age of 80. Oh my goodness. Oh, wow. Bless his heart. Some of the greatest songs in the history of rock and roll, based heavily upon rhythm and blues. Indeed, they've been called the greatest blues band, and they've been following behind all of the greats in blues. Well, Charlie Watts passed into glory at the age of 80 in London. Let's talk about vaccine mandates. What do you think about that? How do you feel about being mandated to do anything? You know, Americans appear to have a really tough time with that. But now, in Chicago, now that Pfizer has received full approval from the FDA, from the Food and Drug Administration, now people are saying, well, now the door has been opened to vaccine mandates. Now, in Chicago, it has been proposed that city employees must be vaccinated. What do you think about that? Call me or text me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. The question is, are they legal? Are they legal? There is a report that says that, at least not as of yet, but the White House staff, they're not being mandated, at least not yet. But what do you think about city employees, teachers, and firemen and women, and policemen and women, and on and on? How will they react to that? How will their unions react to that? How will you react to that? I want to know what you're thinking. Call me or text me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT, and let us get on top of this crackling. Paul, they're saying that they're hearing some crackling, so let's do what we can. Maybe you need to bring me down just a little bit. 773-763-9278. We have got Cook County Commissioner Brandon Johnson with us today. Of course, he's been with the Chicago Teachers Union, and he's been a teacher. He's a father. He's a husband. Has a lot of skin in this game. Robert Patillo, who hosts his own radio show on the iconic WAOK radio station in Atlanta. He's also the Southeastern Regional Director for Rainbow Push every Sunday from 1 to 4 Eastern Standard Time. You can hear his magnificent radio show, Eastern Standard Time. And of course, she hosts her own radio show. The chair of Rainbow Push and the outgoing president of the National Bar Association, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, every Tuesday from 11 to 12 Eastern Standard Time. You don't want to miss her show. And we have got Dwight McKee, Dr. D. That's right, brilliant social scientist. And Dr. Deb said, I want to hang on. I want to find out what's going on because we want to hear your thoughts too. What about these vaccine mandates? What do you think about them, everybody? Let me start with you, Commissioner Johnson, who hosts your own show here on WCPT. When can we hear your show? I know it comes on after Keep Hope Alive.
Right, of course, that's intentional. Good morning. To talk all the world from 9 to 10 a.m. Central Time. So we're just about coming to an end of our second full year. So really, really humbled and thrilled to be able to bring truth and justice through the airwaves.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I have to give him a lot of credit for me being on WCPT. How about that? You changed my life, Brandon. Commissioner Johnson, what about these vaccine mandates? To your way of thinking, are they legal?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, first of all, you mentioned the work of teachers, and particularly the Chicago Teachers Union. I don't know if you remember, but last year we were pushing hard for the vaccine to be made available to educators in order to, move from remote learning to in-person learning. That was certainly a struggle with the city of Chicago, and as a result of that push, though. I want to say as high as 75 to 80% of CTU members are fully vaccinated. So I've always found it to be necessary. Santita, I think this is, pretty straightforward for me, though I understand that there are, reasonings why certain individuals are opting out of the vaccine for reasons that you've already mentioned. But, the reality of this is wearing the mask, making sure that we're socially distancing ourselves from folks, and getting the vaccine is one of the surest ways in which we can keep our communities healthy. The last thing that I'll say is this is especially important for vulnerable communities like the ones that I serve on the west side of Chicago and the western suburbs of Chicago. And it's certainly very disconcerting to see that even though as a state we have reached about I think we're about 55% of Illinoisans fully vaccinated. That number is a little bit higher amongst those who are 65 years old and older. But the real harshness in this moment is as we prepared to send our children back to school, my wife and I are preparing for that, that the positivity rate for young people is becoming very, very much alarming. About a year ago, we were looking at about an admission into hospitals about 20 per week. That eventually peaked out at about 35. But what we're seeing over the last 7 days, the hospitalization of children has jumped substantially. I mean, we're looking at, as of last week, I believe, about 40 admissions a week as of last Wednesday. So it's very, very much, I think, critical that people who have frontline responsibilities to take this virus seriously, 600,000 plus deaths. But, the surest way in which I believe that we can keep our community safe in this instance is to really make the high demand and mandate that we take responsibility in this moment to make sure that we're not getting sick, and certainly we're not exposing other people to this deadly virus.
Everybody, what do you think? I want you to call me or text me at 773-763. WCPT 773-763-9278. Let's talk about vaccine mandates. It is about to come into effect here in Chicago. We will be requiring that city employees get the vaccine. What do you think about that? What do you think about that? According to this report from Block Club Chicago, all city workers will soon be required to get vaccinated against coronavirus. According to our mayor, Lori Lightfoot, the announcement isn't yet official as details are being worked out, she said, but the move will soon be official. She said city employees are absolutely going to be required to be vaccinated. We're working through those discussions which have been ongoing for a couple of weeks with our colleagues in organized labor that represent city employees. What do you think about that? Robert Patillo, what do you make of these mandates? Robert? Well, you know what? Let me go to you. Dwight McKee, you're here in Chicago. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that, I think it's going to create a beehive of resistance. And I think it's going to be a fight that's going to be a very difficult fight to win, not just for civil rights issues and legal issues, but you have the right to demand somebody to take a vaccination, particularly if they don't believe that they have, for religious reasons, they're not going to take it. From that to just acts of defiance, because so many of the police are antagonistic to the mayor, that many of them may just, for the sake of making a point, may resist it. I just think it's going to be a very hard fight to win. And if a lot will have to do with what the punishment is if you don't get it. If the punishment is that you get fired or you have to quit, or you may not have a job, then I think that's going to enhance the resistance. Is that a lot of the police now, because they're disgruntled, their position is they are dealing with what we call blue flu, where many of them are not even fulfilling the mission of the job, because they're mad about the police mandates on how they deal with the public and what they're now required and not required to do. I think that if you compound that with the notion that you now have to be vaccinated because I told you so, it's going to create almost an internal civil war between the police and City Hall.
Robert Patillo, are you there? Well, we'll get Robert, but let me go to you, CK. What about these mandates? Is this going to work?
Well, first, good morning, Santita. No, these mandates, while there's probably going to be legal challenges for sure that ultimately could go to the U.S. Supreme Court, they are permissible. They are, and the states are doing it, localities are doing it, cities are doing it. I think what Dwight McKee is talking about is, to me, more of a political reality of what's going to happen. The carnage, if you will, not literally, but politically and socially, with telling people in a workplace that they must do something. There's a precedent for that in this country. This is not necessarily anything new when it comes to vaccinations. Polio, tuberculosis, I remember when we were younger, we had to get vaccinated before going to school. So this is not new. It's not a first impression in the United States. However, there are carve-outs for religious reasons and for medical reasons. Some people just cannot get the vaccination. I believe that for those carve-outs, really, there probably would be exceptions created. Even with the EEOC and some of the laws that are passed, there is something that talks about that. But widespread mandates, I believe, are going to happen. It's inevitable because there is a belief that's supported by some medical literature and some medical expertise that it is only with widespread vaccinations in this country that we have a chance of minimizing and of flattening the curve of people dying from this. And I have to say, parenthetically, here in the Atlanta metropolitan area recently, I don't know if it hit the national news, there was a 17-year-old football player, stellar, who had a full scholarship to Morehouse. And he got COVID-19. This was at the end of July, was admitted to the hospital. And this is the reality of what's happening with our young people. He went to the hospital. His parents took him to the hospital. And the hospital gave him something and turned him away. They gave him a little something and said, look, he's got COVID and turned him away and said, tell him to go home and keep him hydrated. His mother and father took him back to the hospital because he got worse. that hospital turned him away again. He was so fragile that he couldn't even walk. He couldn't hold a cup. And he was big. He was like maybe 270, 280 pounds, 6'4", football player, 17 years old. They turned him away, did not admit him. And so the parents frantic, and when the orderlies were trying to get him into the car, the medical staff, they couldn't because he was so big, and he fell flat on his face into the car. He was collapsing, and something was going on. So his parents took him to another nearby hospital, and that hospital took him in. They couldn't believe what was happening, and that young child died. That child died because a hospital not once but twice turned him away.
But
he
hold
was not
on.
Vaccinated.
But hold on. But he was also not treated. See, that's something that bothers me.
He was not treated, but let me tell you what's happening in this area, and I don't know if it's happening everywhere. Hospitals may begin, because insurance companies are turning down.
Yeah.
Are refusing to recognize the treatment. And hospitals may require people to pay for all of their COVID-related treatments, including when they just come to the hospital and are diagnosed. So this is a real, real problem. But I'm most concerned about our children. He was 17, so he could have been vaccinated. And that was, as opposed to people focusing on the fact that he was turned away twice by a medical facility, people are focused on that he wasn't vaccinated because he was 17. He could have been vaccinated. And yes, he could have been vaccinated, but let's not get too cute here. A child died.
But and that's gangster talk. And let me tell you, that is gangster talk. Because you know what? First of all, the child was turned away. See, that's my problem. When we're talking about equity and when we're talking about how people are treated, you don't turn people away. First, do no harm. I didn't take the Hippocratic Oath, but I sure have heard about it. How can he be turned away? How can he be denied therapeutics? If you get COVID, say if you have been vaccinated and you get COVID, the COVID shot's not going to help you. You need therapeutics. People are fighting for those. That was in my chat line yesterday. I'm dealing with this right now because COVID has come home for me. I was upset about it before both my parents were hospitalized with it. I mean, how can this child be turned away from all of these facilities? How can he be sent home? How does that work?
Well, he was sent away, and it was the same facility that sent him away twice. But my point is that there are multiple layers of this. So the question that you originally posed is how is this working? Is it right? Is it legal? This mandate. It's going to happen. It's going to happen, but I don't want us to lose sight on what's happening to our children. And this young man could have been vaccinated, but that's not the narrative. He was turned away. That was awful. But there are a lot of children that can't be vaccinated. There's no vaccination for them yet. Before, when we had to take polio, we had to take tuberculosis, all those shots, we had to take Santita. Remember when we were younger, I still have the scarring on my right arm of the shots I had to take.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not new for us to have to take shots, for children to have to take shots. But it is getting to the point, and I can only speak to certain localities in the South, where there are not enough pediatric beds to treat children who have COVID, much less children who have other ailments. So children who may be diagnosed with cancer and need chemotherapy treatments or have some type of illness that is critical, that's life-threatening, because of now the overpopulation of the pediatric units, the overpopulation of all the other units, because of people getting COVID, those children who don't have the ability to be vaccinated cannot be treated, and there's not enough facilities to treat them. And those children who may have life-threatening illnesses and diseases can't be treated because the space, the beds, the medical personnel are consumed with the children who are dying from COVID or who are seriously infected with COVID. This is a real crisis. So I believe, yes, there are going to be legal challenges without a question. More having to do with the fine points. You know, if you have medical exceptions or you have religious beliefs that wouldn't allow you to do that. And of course, the unions are going to challenge us as well. But I do believe that something's got to be done because right now, the populations at risk are children and the elderly.
Well, you know what? His parents need to sue that hospital. His parents need to sue the hospital. Really. Because they continue to wedge that. I'm all about the Swiss cheese approach and protecting people. But to turn people away when they're sick, what is that?
Well, let me just say about that, I cannot comment on that part.
Okay, I got 30 seconds.
But I think you're right, but I, for professional reasons, can't comment.
Sure, I got you. Well, I'm just a talk show host.
But you're absolutely right, because hypothetically, I can't comment because hypothetically, suppose that family reached out to me, so I can't comment on that.
How about
but
that?
I can comment on what's in the public story that is of disconcerting here in the Atlanta area. Being turned away from a hospital, that's a separate issue. But what's happening to children, just throughout the country, and the elderly, I think that's what needs to be discussed. And these mandates are going to happen. They're going to happen.
Stay right there. We're going to talk about that. I mean, it's going to happen, but you know what? At the same time, people need health care. Come on now. You can't turn people away when they're sick. Are you kidding me? You can't ask them whether they've had a vaccine or not. Because there's some vaccinated people, I know them, who are in the hospital. What are we supposed to do? What is going on here? More of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute.
Take the time to say a prayer.
They can't justify that. And I know what you're doing. And I understand, your parameters, but this child. I mean, I'm serious. I'm like, whoa.
How? But what I'm saying to you is it's happening. There are a lot of people.
There are a lot
of narratives where children are being turned away, where adults are being turned away, where the hospital staff, they're saying, look, you got COVID, and when they find out that you're not vaccinated, they're like, well, and you didn't, and then they really, really are upset. And so I think that these are the real things that are happening in real life, real time. And I guess I'm most concerned about the children, because on some level, adults, we can make our decisions. We can make up our minds on what is best for us and what's not best for us, for medical reasons, religious reasons, or whatever reasons, what we can and can't do. But children, when there's no option, even if the parents wanted them to be vaccinated, are the most vulnerable. So when they're turned away, whether they're vaccinated or not, I mean, I just think it's problematic, and that is happening to Black and brown children. No surprise.
What's problematic for me?
Than other children.
What's problematic for me, CK, is that question is being posed in the first place. Brandon,
of course, it's
Dwight.
Problematic.
First of all, when someone is sick, do everything you can to heal them. Because now I'm feeling gangstered here, and this is ridiculous. Because you know what? Last year, Black people, they would present at the hospital with milder symptoms. They couldn't get tested. It's the same thing. Now or you can't, they're just not going to admit you to the hospital. We are a nation of 330 million people. We have fewer than 1 million beds. I think that's ridiculous. I really, really do. There's real off here. That child should not be dead. He went there. I'm not feeling well. They said give you basically Tylenol and send you on your way. What is that? What is that?
Yeah, it's actually irresponsible, Santita, and it's why I said it, at the onset of my comments about really being concerned about our children, and Attorney CK obviously just illuminated what my concern has been all along. The fact that we don't have the vaccine available for children under 12. You're already seeing the reversal of the mandate to send children back to schools. I mean, in Chicago alone, I believe about 25% of our families eventually returned back to the building for in-person learning last year. And we put a lot of mitigating layers in place to keep, children and the staff with more people likely to return in the fall, which is going to take place in a few days. The way this variant is running rampant through our communities, it's why I don't know how you can have a conversation outside of, making the vaccine a mandate. Cook County government, we've already done it for our healthcare workers and all of our workers. And I think the attorney CK is absolutely right. You have these larger political challenges that you're going to have, but it's not unprecedented. In fact, during one of the most horrific times in history, 100 years ago, the last big pandemic, it's how we ended up with nurses in schools. That wasn't a thing.
Therapeutics, that's all I'm saying. Put therapeutics in the mix because people are not getting these therapeutics. They're not able to get medicine to get treated. Commissioner, that's ridiculous. You can't. This is not a one-trick pony. You just can't just do that. People need it all. Stay right there.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. We're talking about vaccine mandates in the city of Chicago and all around the country. It's going to be mandated that city employees be vaccinated. Okay, we just heard about this tragic story of this child, 14-year-old, in Atlanta, who was turned away. He was feeling awful. He was turned away from treatment. He was turned away from the hospital. And when he finally did present, he was dead. Come on, what is that? What is going on here? What is going on here? And how will these mandates work? I mean, how will they work? I mean, because Americans seem to, push back against mandates of all kinds. So we're going to see. Before I come back to you, Commissioner Johnson, Attorney Patillo, you with us?
I'm right here, yeah.
Okay, what do you make of? How do you think these vaccine mandates are going to roll out? I mean, now that Pfizer has been fully approved by the FDA, what do you think is going to happen? How do you think it's going to play out? Just politically, how will they play out? Socially, how will they play out? Medically, how do you think it's going to play out?
Well, I think we're going to see a lot of litigation around it because right now they're being used as blunt force instruments. For example, the New York restaurant mandate doesn't have an exception for people who can't medically get it or who can't religiously get it, creating kind of a second-class citizenship where you can't go to a gym, you can't go to a restaurant, you can't go to a show, ostensibly because of your lack of vaccination. But when it's for a religious reason or for a medical reason, then ostensibly it's that you're saying, well, because of your religious beliefs, you can't go to a restaurant. So I do think there will be litigation around this. What I think is that many of these businesses and many of these municipal governments are going to have a more nuanced approach, create exceptions where necessary. The goal is to get as many people who can get vaccinated, so that it protects those who cannot get vaccinated for medical or religious or for other reasons. So this is new to us. I don't think many Americans were prepared for this, and many businesses and or local governments were prepared for this. So I think as we work our way through, we can find a balancing act where we can ensure that we're protecting individual liberties, but also protecting the public health of the public at large.
I mean, I'm Attorney C.K. Hoffler. I'm just really, really concerned about this particular case because I also saw on my talk line yesterday, someone had COVID. They went to the hospital. They couldn't get the therapeutics. It's like, we're seeing this. Not just bifurcated. We're seeing different people are getting access to different treatment, which is where when Dr. Deb talks about equity, that becomes an issue. I mean, all of the
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And that's fodder for medical negligence cases for sure. I don't know if you recall, but at the beginning, when COVID first came on the scene, at least in a widespread way, where all of us had knowledge of it, there were people who were being turned away, or the nurses were making determinations in the emergency room not to treat certain ailments of certain people, Black and brown people, in some communities, because the priority was COVID, dealing with COVID patients. And so, again, we're seeing this happening again, but that's where you see medical negligence, where the medical professionals are having to make a determination of who they treat, who they shouldn't treat, if they're going to treat, why they're going to treat. And just to use the example of this young boy who was, he was 17 years old. He went back. I just want to be clear. He went to the same hospital twice and was turned away. So they told him, you've got COVID. They gave him some basic stuff and they said, look, this is COVID, go home and rest it out. He got worse. His parents took him back because that was the nearest facility. And they did the same thing, and his condition progressed to the point where he didn't have control over his bodily parts. And there was a lot of shaming and all that kind of stuff going on too. But ultimately, this parent, when he had to get some other people to help get him in the car because he wasn't able to control his bodily parts, as I said, and they took him to the nearest other facility, and that facility was, of course, horrified because he was having seizures and all the things that you have when you're approaching the final stages of COVID.
And that's my point. It didn't have to get that far. When he first presented himself, and this happened to so many people who are now dead. When he first presented, they were turned away. And then by the time they re-presented, they need to be on ventilators. There's something about that that's a little off to me. People are not getting treated. In addition to everything else, they're not getting treated, and that's not fair. It's wrong.
Absolutely.
First thing you ask them, were you vaccinated or not? Are you kidding me? Stop it. Treat people. That's your job. That's your job. Stop judging everybody. It's your job. Is it someone's fault? Look, I had weight loss surgery where you can say, well, you're fat, and so, we're not going to treat you. Yeah, because that's how you're treated in the medical profession. Believe me. They wouldn't even look for anything else that you might have been struggling with because you're fat. So, are you kidding me? Stop it. We're losing lives needlessly. I don't know that boy's case. I'm not a physician, but I do know this. First problem he had was that he was not treated. That's the first problem. Before you get into anything else, he wasn't treated, and he's not. Dwight?
Yes.
You have anything to say?
Yeah, I think that it's a little more complicated. The legal issue is going to be a little more complicated than the state has the right to demand for somebody to take a shot or lose their job. As I think about the Ali case, where back then, you were mandated to go to war if the state told you to go to war, but he was able to resist that because of separation of church and state, and he had the right as a conscientious objector not to go to war, and the Supreme Court upheld that. I think the fact that they don't have the right to ask you if you're gay or straight when you go for a job, but they have the capacity to demand to know if you've been vaccinated or not. I think that the legalism is going to be a little more complicated than what we see now. But I also think just the basic resistance beyond the legal. And then what's going to happen is that when they see it as a civil rights issue, then even the police force, who's to the right of in Chicago, many of them are to the right of Trump, will be join SCLC or push. They will become Jesse Jackson and Martin Luther King and talk about how they have to resist bad laws. And they will be having sit-ins and walkouts. And I mean, this thing is going to get to be a lot more complicated, I think, than we see, because it's a very complicated issue, and it harbors right to the point of fascism for the government under the guise of safety to demand that you abide by their will. And even with it not being proven that these shots are panacea anyway, I mean, it's going to be a very complicated issue, you all.
Well, Commissioner Johnson, can you mandate that people get treated when they present themselves at the hospital?
Thank you, Santita, for raising that and staying with it. Look, I think the point that you're making earlier about how mean our society can be towards individuals and families, it's actually quite grotesque when we think about the health disparities. And Santita, this is not just, limited to the city of Chicago or the county of Cook, but the health disparities are so dramatic that, here on the west side of Chicago, if you stretch down the Eisenhower, go down the blue line, life expectancy jumps 20 as high as 30 years.
30 years.
As you get further and further away, 30, thank you, as you get further and further away from the 60644 zip code, the zip code that my wife and I are raising our children in. And it's why we've been pushing at the city level and the county level to have school-based clinics. You know, I know it sounds like I'm, ranting or so-called beating on a dead horse, but during the school closings under Rahm Emanuel's reign, there was at least 2 schools that had health-based clinics inside those schools that also provided groceries for families as another means of health care. We don't think about access to healthy food as access to good quality health care. So it's not only pushing to make nurses available in all of our schools, but having school-based clinics in our school communities and really pushing for Medicare for all. I can't emphasize it enough. The fact that, your father was on the cutting edge, 2 generations ago, seemingly, but at least a generation ago, a little bit before I even knew my ABCs, calling for a right to live, which is essentially what we're calling for, having access to health care, to CK.
This is more than 40 years ago.
A point.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, we saw like right here in not just the city of Chicago, but in Georgia, because you have some of these school districts were not mandating masks. Now they have to reverse their in-person learning plan where schools are being shut down again. Look, I believe the point that you're making, Santita, I think is the most important point, that if we're not handling and treating people with dignity and respect, people are going to die. And as complicated as this might be for some, it's not that complicated for me. The mandate that we have pushed at the county level is about saving lives. The people who will have litigation and they'll have critique about that, the only thing I can say is, we understand that in America, we've come accustomed to be able to express, our viewpoints and our stances. But the truth of the matter is, Black and brown folks, but particularly Black older folks, have borne the brunt of this failed, wicked, mean system that has not provided the preventative care well before the pandemic. And so now, Santita, we have an opportunity to change course. And that's why every single school should have a nurse. We should have school-based clinics. Mm-hmm. And we got to make sure that healthcare is a guarantee, right? Anything short of that, we're not serious about protecting the lives of people.
And we're not even serious in this pandemic, because what really irritates me about this child, as I go to Renee on the phone, they're just going to record him as a COVID death. No, he died of mistreatment, maltreatment, ill treatment, no treatment. That's what he died of. COVID is after the fact. He could have been treated. If you treated him, he might, more than likely, he'd be here. Renee, what's on your mind?
Morning, and
hey.
Thanks for taking my call. The case with the teenager reminds me of the doctor who was in the hospital with COVID in Indiana.
Oh, the Black woman. That's right.
She streamed Facebook on Facebook Live. Mm-hmm. She streamed them not giving her the care that she needed. So that's a problem in this country. But
wait, hold on, Renee. Because remember, first they didn't believe she was a physician.
Right.
Remember that? And as she was explaining her case to them, the man started looking at her and he said, I wonder, perhaps, you do know a lot. Are you serious? Please go on, continue.
Oh. And you shouldn't have to be a doctor to get care, and she didn't get it as doctors. So that tells you what regular people face when they go to some of these doctors. But regarding CPS and the vaccination mandate, if CPS was really serious about keeping people safe and about the students who will be coming to school next week, they would not have students sitting less than 3 feet apart from each other in classrooms with over 20 students who are not vaccinated, even though you can spread it if you are vaccinated. They would not have a policy that says if you're vaccinated, you don't have to fill out the health screener. So you can spread it to the students. If you might not even know that you have COVID. You have symptoms, but you don't have to that parents know that there's somebody that might be in that classroom. who has COVID so other students can spread it to other places. I hope I'm making sense. This policy doesn't make sense. And I think if you want to mandate a vaccine, give people more options. There are other vaccines that our government could have funded that aren't the new technology that goes on your DNA or whatever it does. There are more traditional vaccines. Why haven't we put money in those areas? They didn't pay the politicians enough? I don't know. Brandon, I love you.
I love you too, Renee. Thank you so much. If I just could, I think to Renee's point, not to mention not having the type of layered mitigations that are important to keep the school community safe, but we still don't have proper ventilation in many of our old facilities in government, many of our housing complexes, our senior facilities. There's a lot of work to be done, but keep in mind, I think this is what Renee is ultimately getting at. The city of Chicago alone is going to receive $2 billion. The Chicago Public Schools will receive $2 billion. So just in the city of Chicago alone, the federal government is sending $4 billion. Cook County is going to receive $1 billion. So throughout the city of Chicago, there's minimally $4 billion up to $5 billion for the entire region. And that doesn't count what smaller villages will receive in the state of Illinois. There are dollars that are being pushed in our communities. And not only do we have a mean society as articulated and manifested in the case of the family that C.K. Hoffer mentioned, but you also have a very stingy government system that looks to only protect the handful who always have access to the resources that ultimately protect their sanctity. And so this is why I believe that we have to continue not only to have these conversations, but put a demand on elected officials like myself, people who are educators. You're in your rank and file labor folks. Put a demand on the union, because you are the union. The union is not the leadership that's elected. It's the rank and file members that make up the union to really push for safety and healthy measures that can ultimately save lives. And that's really what our goal should be, Santita, is not just to have these mandates in place just so that you can check a box, but how about we make sure that we're protecting lives? And that is not confined to, again, making sure that people have access to health care. There's still affordability issues throughout this country. There's still a jobless market that is causing folks not to have access to health care, because the only way you can access health care, unfortunately, in this country is if you have a W-2. So this system actually has to be challenged and disrupted like we saw 40 years ago. We are finally reaping some benefit of what the 80, 84, 88 effort was that pushed in black mayors across this country, that propelled, of course, Reverend Jackson's leadership, that ultimately led to the first black elected president. And so it's incumbent upon this generation to set a new course. And hopefully we don't have to wait, 40 years to save lives, Santita. But I think the model for organizing and pushing our government, that's labor, community-based organizations, the faith community, and a few good elected officials to stand up and speak truth to power, and then actually put policies in place that can protect people's lives. That's what we have to do in this moment to make sure that posterity is in a much better position than the way we found it or the way we have it today.
Sure, and be more than black. I mean, because that was a push that Dr. King was involved in more than 50 years ago. And Reverend, they say that Dr. King was the architect and Reverend was the builder. That's what it's been. It's been a movement, but it's not just to get black faces in high places. It's about getting people who are sensitive and sane, red, yellow, black, brown, and white, who believe in Medicare for all, a universal single payer system, who believe that no person, young or old, any color, any background, any particular persuasion, vaccinated, unvaccinated, should be turned away from health care, period. These are the wrong questions that we're asking. We don't even have a system that can care for people on the best day. That's a problem. This child was turned, it's just a child out in front of his parents. Are you kidding me? That's the first problem. Somebody in there didn't care. Somebody in there didn't mind if he died. A whole lot of people have died of COVID because they have not been treated, because they were sent home. What happened? But when you presented, you got, oh, no. They didn't get to the hospital way before they could have. And when they went, they were not treated. They were turned away when their symptoms were milder. COVID is more easily treated the earlier you catch it. They need to stop playing these games with people. And I hope that this family sues and gets a lot of money, but nothing's going to replace the loss of that child. Nothing. Not a thing. I'm going to get closing thoughts from everybody. Robert Patillo, you got about a minute and a half. Your closing thoughts.
Well, I think it's important that we push our elected officials to have nuance in these situations, to find out the best ways to balance the competing interests, to balance the need for bed space, for ICU space, the need for public health, but also with individual liberties and ensuring that we're providing the best health outcomes for the entirety of the community. Nobody wants a repeat of 2020. We don't want refrigerated trucks. We don't want the diggings of mass graves, but at the same time, we do not want the individual's rights to be violated in such a way that we wonder what exactly we're fighting for. So it's going to take the time and effort. It's going to take an engaged public to get to that point, but I do think we can find the proper balance in our society.
I think that we can. I really do. C.K. Hoffler, what are we looking at?
Well, I would say this. We have got to remember in all of this fight, whether it's legal fight or not, that we have got to focus on the children and the elderly because they are the most powerless group in this country. And they should be the most protected. So I think, and it should not, the discussion should not be, well, vaccinated, not vaccinated. Help people who are in a medical crisis. And I believe it's inexcusable that child was turned away in Georgia, but I would venture to say there are probably hundreds of thousands of children in Black and brown communities and elderly who have experienced the same. So I think as we discuss and progress with these mandates, I hope that we will also remember to protect the least of these in that discussion and not be callous when it comes to medical treatment. Because if so, hello, there are medical negligence lawyers like me. And that's all I'm going to say.
Well, amen to that. Dwight McKee?
Oh, well, I think that we should not look to compound a very complicated issue with more complexity. And when you add another layer of mandatory vaccinations on the table, then you create more discord in a society which is fixated right now on discord. This last week, Trump said that talked about vaccinations. He didn't even talk about mandatory vaccinations. He just recommended vaccinations, and even his crowd booed him for the first time. I just see that this knowing a lot of these policemen around the country and how right-wing and self-righteous that they are, is if they're going to see it as a civil rights issue, take it to the streets, and a complicated issue has become even more complicated.
I think, and ugly. Commissioner Brandon Johnson, where do we go from here? Because our children are going back to school. I mean, how do we get through this?
No, you're absolutely right. Well, we have to do everything that we can to prevent the spread of COVID in our school communities. I mean, that's just the bottom line. And, it's as far as I'm concerned, you got to push mask wearing. You got to have social distancing. And in order to hold the numbers down, you got to have a higher vaccination rate. I mean, it's just pretty straightforward for me. But I think, as we talk about where we go from here, I think the organizing that we will continue to do is important. But I think I don't want it to be lost on our audience what you've already articulated. We have to have a civic compassion and love for humanity to be able to treat people with dignity. But the encouraging thing is, you're absolutely right, Santita. Black, brown, and white folks across the city of Chicago, the county, the country, there's a real commitment to bring equity and justice and to tear down and dismantle the structural systems that have kept people out. And so I'm very much encouraged by a generation that is very much committed to bringing the type of broad coalition that ultimately can push for policies that push for equity and justice. And so we have to continue that effort and do not get weary, of course, in the work that we're doing.
Amen to that. And everybody, let's continue to have the conversations. You know, because one of the things that's happened in this time, as you said, Dwight McKee, is that we're living in a time of discord, and we're continuing to sow the seeds instead of reaching for peace, instead of reaching for justice and equity and helping people to be heard. People want to be heard. People want to be recognized. They want to be acknowledged. They want to be respected. They want to be protected. And they deserve all of that. This child should be alive today. That's the lesson. I don't want to hear another reporter or media person ask the parents, well, did he get the vaccine? He was too young to get it. And there are breakthrough cases. The question is, why was he not treated when he was presented at the hospital by his parents needing help? Why not? We've seen so much of that. It happened all last year. That's why people went home and got real sick and then came back to the hospital and died. Think about that, everybody. Think about it. I'm Santita Jackson. God bless you. Can't wait to be with you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. We will destroy ourselves. All right, everybody. We're still on Facebook Live, but I have to tell you, I'm really, CK, very disturbed by that because so many people have not been treated. They can't, now that the therapeutics are there, you can't get them. Whatever my political disagreements are with Governor DeSantis in Florida, at least he's opened that door. Open the door. Because guess what? People have to have the opportunity to get well. When President Trump presented to the medical personnel, when he had COVID, he was sick as he could be, and you could see it too. Anytime he had to leave the White House, he had to be very sick because they are perfectly capable of taking care of just about anything at the White House. But they couldn't do it. When you go to Walter Reed, you got a problem. And they threw everything but the kitchen sink at him. And he's still here in his 70s with comorbidities. Just asking for everyone to have the opportunity. CK, Dwight, Commissioner, Robert.
Absolutely.
What is this? He wasn't vaccinated. His wife wasn't. Presumably his child was not. What? And then you fall out and then someone says, oh, another COVID death. I'm like, no. This is not, What happened with that? So many people who couldn't get tested last year, Commissioner. They couldn't get tested and they couldn't get treated. And by the time they presented to get treated, the COVID was so far gone, there was nothing you could do but hook them up to a ventilator and let them say goodbye by teleconference to their family.
And see, this is the meanness that I'm talking about, Santita. You know, what I've learned in my life is that there's this normalcy that presents itself in communities that have always or who've been marginalized for far too long. And death is something that I think in general that some people don't always have like a full understanding of. I don't know who ever will, but it occurs to me of how normalized death has become, particularly in communities that people have just come, quote, accustomed to seeing, and whether that's violence in communities, lack of health care, dying from COVID, just on and on and on. The stress of that our communities are enduring right now is far heavier than I think that most people can even imagine. The last thing that I'll say is that when we talk about healthcare being made available, that also has to include, and we shouldn't have to separate it in our discussions, but mental health care related services are going to be vital. You know, Santita, you shared some of your personal story, and I appreciate you being vulnerable as you shared stories about growing up, with a father who was constantly under threat. I don't think we know to the full extent of how trauma has deeply impacted these same communities that are suffering loss and homelessness, death, COVID. The way we treat people in this moment, I think, tells an awful lot about our government and just society in general. Now, the encouraging thing is that there are far more conscientious people in position. Obviously, your voice is important because, you've made yourself vulnerable in talking about your life and your upbringing. And so it's been becoming more normalized for us not only to seek treatment, but treatment that also includes our mental health and our mental well-being. Because I got to admit, Santita, early on in the pandemic, my oldest, who is now 13, his workstation was next to mine. And so he heard every Cook County briefing known to mankind or humankind. And I know that impacted him, just because I watched his behavior and how cautious he was. And of course, there's some value in that, but I had to really help process information with him so that he didn't wear the burden of the type of loss that we've experienced over the last 18 months. It's horrific, but there has to be a level of civic compassion and love for people right now. And anything short of that, Santita, we're not living up to the moment. Those are my thoughts and my opinion.
No, I mean, look, I hear you. We're not. It's, you know what? But Williams on our show every Friday, she said, COVID is a snitch. It's just pull back the covers on who we really are in every way. In every way. You saw that the system itself was built on sand. It just took just a little nudge for everything to come apart. Everything. Everything. I mean, how sick can you be when people are working at a factory and the managers are taking bets on who's going to get COVID? Are you are you serious? I mean, really? No. Yes, please.
Or Santita, it's along that line, or providing protective gear for management and not for the workers.
How about that?
And let's not forget when we talk about the mental health component to it, and I'm so glad that was raised. Let's just talk about the PTSD that we've all faced, seeing over and over George Floyd and others being killed.
Oh, I think that was like the ultimate last year. I mean, a snuff film, because that's what it was.
Yeah.
You were like, wait, what? And I think just everybody, we lost our collective mind with that. But just, I think we showed about this child, because it's wrong what happened to him. But you know what happened to him happened over and over and over again last year. If you're uninsured and
this just happened in July.
Oh yeah, I mean, but you think about the uninsured, the underinsured. Think about how they've been masking what uninsured people have to pay at the hospital, and different insurance companies charge you differently. I mean, this is awful. It's just awful. And I pray for those parents. I pray for that young man's family, that boy's family, because they have got to be horrified. But more than that, they have got to be furious. What a waste. But it's not a waste. It's almost like an Emmett Till moment. It really is. I just think that, you go to the hospital, you can't get treated. Oh, No. You're wrong for that. And you're going to pay. You're going to pay. You're not right. You're going to pay. Does anyone else want to say anything? Commissioner Johnson, Dwight McKee, Robert Patillo?
No, I think we encapsulated it all.
I think we've covered the waterfront. Commissioner Johnson, anything else you want to say?
Oh, no, not at this time. Thank you so much, Santita. I guess the only thing I would say is, again, I'm sure you're getting inundated with prayers and thoughts, and how I feel about your father and mother. They're the folks who provided me space 10 years ago when no one knew who I was, and your family's been there for my family, my wife and I, and so we will always be grateful to you all. I don't have much in my will, but whatever I have, I don't know. We'll carve out a little something for you.
Oh, bless you. But you know what? Thank you.
Obviously, praying for y'all.
No. We're not inundated. We're covered. There's a difference, because it's not a bother to have people care for you, love you. I had a call from a friend who said, we need to go down to Northwestern Hospital. She said, but I know we can't get in. I said, if you go there, just go pray. That's all I need you to do. Because I have a pastor who used to sing to us every Sunday, it is no secret what God can do. What he's done for others, he's done for you. And I just know that God is real. And I know that there's room at the cross for me, you, and everybody. You may be high, low, rich, or poor. It does not matter. There's room at the cross for you. And I feel people's prayers. I really, really do. We feel people's prayers. And we thank you. We thank you for that. More than I can say. More than I can say. My father has often said to my brothers, my sister and I, I'm not going to leave you a lot of money. That was not my point. But I hope to leave you a good name. And you know what? I think he's done that. And what he's tried to do is leave us good works. And When I look at how the fact that my parents have access to great treatment and so many prayers is nothing but the good works that my mother and father have done for 60 years that are coming back. And I just thank God for that. But they want to use this moment so that every human being can be treated the way that they've been treated. That's the point. That's the point. Everybody should have access to treatment. Everybody. Everybody. You shouldn't have to fight for therapeutics. You shouldn't have to do that. You shouldn't have to fight for a vaccine. And you should have a right to ask about the vaccine and what's in it. You should have right. You have rights, and you must use them. That's my point. Dwight, your final thoughts before we go?
Well, irony of it all is the sickest part of the American system is the health system, and that I think that if we're counting on them to heal us, we run the risk of being just another part of the profit motive that kind of keeps them in business. It seems to me that most of the incentive is not in healing. It is in keeping us sick so they can get the residual from our illness. And then we have to learn to take more responsibility, personal responsibility for our own health, and have to study to see those things that work that are not necessarily part of that system. But even going back to some of the things that our grandmothers and grandfathers did in terms of natural medicine, in terms of better food, in terms of exercise, in terms of a commitment to health, so we don't have to depend upon them to heal us.
C.K. Hoffler, do you have anything to say before we go?
Santita, I think we said it all, but let's continue to pray for your parents. Pray for that, as you said, that everyone would have the ability when they are sick to receive first-class treatment, and that nobody will be turned away, and so that we're not having a narrative of a 17-year-old child who was fighting for his life and being turned away, not once, but twice. And finally, when he's accepted into a healthcare facility, it's just too late.
Yeah. And we saw that happen over and over and over again. And then you're going to tell me it's just COVID. No, you didn't treat people, and you didn't treat people right. I don't doubt the severity of COVID. Believe me, I understand how severe it is. But I also know if you leave something untreated and it's serious, people are going to die. That's what happened with this boy. And then they're just going to put him on the rolls as, oh, another COVID death. No. You all didn't treat him. You didn't treat him right. That's why that child is dead. And I hope you sue the pants off these people. But it's not going to return the child to his parents. That's not going to happen. And that's what's so awful. Awful. Hope something good comes out. Something good can come out of it, because God can hit a straight lick with a crooked stick. Oh, God, well, we can use the crooked stick, and God can straighten out the lick. God can do that. And I just hope that happens. And I know that it can. I know that it can, because God can do anything but fail. I love you, everybody. I will see you tomorrow, God willing, on the Santita Jackson Show. Dwight McKee, Robert Patillo, Commissioner Brandon Johnson, my dear brother, I want to thank you in a special way, because CK, he pushed and advocated for me to be on this radio show very early in the morning. I don't forgive him for that, but I do thank him for... Oh, you her. I'm like, I really am on my way back to New York. You're like, no, you need to be here. I said, okay. And didn't know they were going to put me on at 6 a.m. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you. Well, thank you, Commissioner.
Yes, so now you can get up with all the educators every single morning now.
No, I always got up early, but now this is like ridiculous. I'm up at 2, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. Oh, no, she's going to be great. She's great. Yeah. Oh, Santita, you need to do this. This is great. I'm like, really? Okay. All right. Oh, my gosh. But thank you. Hey, Hoffler, what can I say? Just love you, and thank God for you. Thank God for my morning stars. I love you all. And please, Brandon, at 9 o'clock every Sunday here on WCPT, and all around the world, everybody, you can hear Brandon's show. You don't want to miss Commissioner Johnson's show here on WCPT. And thank you, Tanya. God bless you, and Jewel, and Carol, and Dave, and Nina, and Effie, and Annette, and everybody, Andre at the top, and everybody in between. And of course, CK Hoffler every Tuesday from 11 to 12 Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central Standard Time, and on WAOK, Robert Patillo from 1 to 4 every Sunday. And they're bringing him on increasingly throughout the week. That's a great thing because he's an absolute genius and a monster of the mic. And of course, the brilliant Dwight McKee and Dr. Deborah Furholden, who's going to become a grandma by the end of the day, everybody. We're on the India Watch. And Dr. Shanina Knighton, mic dropping Knighton. We love it. Everybody. And thank you, Dr. Effie Rolfe. Today is we're having a healing prayer vigil for Reverend and Mrs. Jesse Jackson at 12 noon. And thank you so much for your prayers. I cannot tell you how much we have felt them, how grateful my brothers, my sister, our parents, and I, we're all so grateful. We're so grateful for the love. We're so grateful. We're so grateful. Love you, Soror. Come on, Delta's in the house. I love it. See, I'm wearing my red and white today. Yeah. But sending you much love, everybody. Sending you much, 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 much love. Thank you for everything. Thank you, Paul, for a great show. I will see you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show.